did receive two, David, but we've dealt with them outside of the board because they were the requesters asked for us to go directly back to them.
Yeah.
instead of
Okay.
pushing it.
Well, that's all right at one level, but it would be great to have more involvement. The trouble is, if as a trust you're doing quite well, nobody turns up. But the minute you start messing things up, then you can't fit everybody in the room. And I'm afraid it's kind of hard for us to get people together, but we ought to try harder and we ought to have a programme that does it. So can we work on
We'll
that?
take that up and I'll take it up.
Annual governance statement. I think it's only that various people had various points on the annual governance statement. I think this is a done job now in that it's been completed, the comments have been reflected and it's been put to bed. So, sorry, it's an active document, isn't it? Right. Service User and Carer Council. There are a number of questions about that. Kenny, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, sure. So it's an evolving programme. The question I think really was about specialist training that we're doing. It's an evolving programme. We're looking to embed it across schools in the provision. There's a note in the action schedule about what we intend to do with that, and I'm sure we'll bring it back through Service User and Care Accounts report at a future date. So yeah, it's a positive story, I think. I don't think there's anything else to add on that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Chair,
Yeah, go on.
if I just explain my reason for raising wanting perhaps, and I appreciate that this forum might not be the forum in which to do it, to see which schools were involved, is really to see how that links with our partnership strategy in order to make sure that we've got the reach right the way across the area. So we've not, sometimes it's easier to do things where there are willing partners. It's perhaps in the more hard to reach areas, and that was the purpose of my raising it.
Yeah, and that brings to mind a more general point that, we rely so heavily on other parties to do our work, and I'm thinking of the voluntary sector in particular. And it would be wonderful, and I know Joe and I have talked about this previously, to have a sort of mapping of the relationships, because not only would that give us a better understanding, but if we can work more closely, we can develop ways of doing things that are much more beneficial for the population. So it's another way of looking at partnership working, but we do need to map it out more than we know at the moment. So maybe we can take that on board too. And the final one is the Audit Committee Assurance Report, the annual report. People again had opportunities to look through it and adjust it slightly and improve it a bit. And I think that's all been done, that's all been taken into account, and the report's been finalised, so everybody's happy. So that's the matters arising. There's an item here, matters arising not covered by the rest of the agenda, but I never know if anything ever comes out of that, but we do it, but no. So we can move on delightfully to the patient's story. And Kenny, can I hand over to you again?
Sure.
On that.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, this month's patient story is, I think, it's a bit different actually. A really innovative way of presenting a story. It involves several young people talking about their experiences of accessing a certain type of talking therapy called dialectical behaviour therapy. The video, like I said, has been produced with the support of our CAM service, and in particular Heather Mason, who I think has joined us on Teams, as have I think two of the young people. So welcome to you all, and thank you so much for sharing this. The young people on the video, as you'll see, explain in their kind of own way some of their experiences which led them to seek support, what DBT has offered them, and some of the outcomes which they've had as a result of accessing DBT. So really interesting, probably not something that we've explored here at the Trust Board before, and done in a way which I think is really different and really innovative. So I'll hand over to Joe, I think, to play. Thank you, Joe.
It's been 3 years now. You need to get over it.
Stop crying.
I don't know why you're being like this.
It's not that hard.
The world doesn't revolve around you.
Don't be so ridiculous.
This is your fault. Don't blame anyone else.
We've all got a lot going on.
Hey, you look like you're having a bit of a bad time. Are you struggling at the minute?
To be honest, yeah. I feel so worthless. People don't get it at all. It's like I'm struggling to get through each day, and they're all just judging me for the wrong reasons. It feels too much. I just have nothing to get up for in the morning. Like, what's the point of even trying? Because I feel so down all the time.
I understand. I went through a time like that. I felt like I couldn't get anything right, and people would be better off without me.
Exactly. I feel like such a burden. I don't want to get out of bed a lot of the time. It's a massive struggle. My friends, my family, even my teachers think I'm being difficult, but I just can't explain what's going on for some reason. I feel like I'm just surviving, to be honest. Not really living at all. I can't see a way out.
That sucks. You know, when I felt like this, I had help from a professional. Have you ever heard of something called dialectical behaviour therapy or DBT? I've got my scrapbook with me actually because I've done it myself.
No. I've never heard of DBT. What's that?
I'll show you my scrapbook in a minute, but it's a type of therapy that helps you to understand and manage everything that's going on a bit better. It gives you skills and tools for the tough times. When you're struggling with difficult thoughts and feelings, or having a bad time with your family and friends, DBT can help.
How?
So there are different modules that last a few weeks each, but basically they cover stuff like learning to deal with a crisis when you're really overwhelmed, how to manage your relationships differently, general day-to-day understanding of your emotions. It's not easy though. You need to be ready to put the effort in.
Okay.
And realise that nobody does it for you. You've got to want the change that DBT can bring, and know that it can be pretty intense at times. But if you're open to it, DBT will be something to try for sure.
I definitely want things to change.
But you're not going to go to one session and wake up the next morning feeling great, you know. It takes time and effort from you to do what the therapy is teaching you. It's around 6 months long, sometimes a bit longer, and it's designed to help you realise that you don't have to suffer in life. It takes commitment and effort, but it guides you through to a life that's actually worth living.
But I get help from a therapist.
Yeah, there's actually a few different layers to DBT. You can have full program, which includes individual therapy, group skills, and telephone coaching, all in like a package. Some people just attend the group though, and you can either attend a group that includes parents and carers, or there's a group just for teens. It depends on you and where you're at really. You get a chance to figure it out with someone of course, and they'll explain more in depth of what's expected of you.
A group? Where we have to sit around in a circle and talk about how we feel and our emotions and stuff.
No, not exactly. It's more about learning, like having a lesson. You won't be quizzed or put on the spot. It's mostly the therapist talking and giving you resources. They encourage group discussions about the materials though, and you can contribute as much as you want, whatever you feel comfortable with.
So, like a lesson, with homework.
Yeah, doing homework is actually really important in DBT because it gives you the chance to go away and practice the skills you've learnt and apply them into real life. It's a great way to explore what works and helps you. If you try a skill and it doesn't work, then that's fine. You can just give the next one a go. There's loads, so don't worry, something will work for you.
Okay, that doesn't sound so scary now. What about this individual therapy?
Those sessions are also weekly, and they're pretty interactive really. While these are a bit more personal than groups, it's still a lot about keeping track of where you're at and trying the skills.
What do you mean they're interactive?
Your therapist makes it interesting for you with different activities and tasks. Like, you're given a diary card to fill in, and then you go through that every week. Or you can get creative and make a poster about DBT like I did. Doing that helped me a lot, because the information sank in much better when I created something by me, for me.
That's why you made a whole scrapbook.
Well, yeah, but this scrapbook is also like a chapter in my life. There's lots of resources that I've taken away from DBT, and having this allows me to look back at anything I need to. Plus, DBT is an ongoing thing, not just for an hour a week for a few months with your therapist. These skills last a lifetime, and you can use them whenever you feel the need.
Yeah, you said it's a big commitment, so I guess that means long term.
Well, life happens and carries on regardless, but DBT gives you the tools to manage the tough times and enjoy the good. I'm a lot more content with my friends and school now thanks to DBT. I'm actually starting college soon, which I never thought I'd say. DBT is really, really good if you commit.
I get you. So if I don't make an effort both in and out of the sessions, I won't suddenly just get better because no one else will do it for me.
That's exactly it. I threw myself into it and realised now that it was what I needed. It was definitely worth doing.
I wouldn't mind seeing what it's like, to be honest. Sounds like it would be helpful, and I really don't just want to survive anymore. Thanks for having this conversation with me. It's really helped me to see that I can have a better future than I thought. It's a relief to have met someone that gets it.
No need to thank me. It's been nice to chat, and I'm glad you're considering DBT. Come on then, let's get going.
There you go.
That was brilliant. Is that a video that's been made by another organisation?
Yeah, so we work with a partner organisation, and Heather, obviously, and the young people have co-produced the content.
All right.
And I think, Heather, I'm sure would offer some more information. Other colleagues know more than I, but I think the idea was for it to be more accessible and obviously not reveal the identities of the young people if that's not what they wanted. So really helpful, I think, format.
So it was a joint venture, really, to help a wide range of people understand what DBT is and how it might be relevant to them. Got it. Okay.
Yes, would you like me to chip in a bit here?
Yeah,
Hi,
please, Heather.
I'm Heather.
Hi, Heather.
Clinical psychologist and lead the DBT service. I can say a little bit more about the inspiration behind developing the video, but as a service, DBT's been running since 2015, and we've had lots of positive outcomes, and we've presented our outcomes at national level, but in terms of how many young people benefit from this service. But most importantly to us, we've received lots of feedback from young people and families that have been through the programme. And what we felt was how valuable that would be to be able to use that feedback to inspire and encourage young people who might be thinking about starting the treatment to kind of put some information into a video. So we, and the young people themselves that have been through DBT, thought this was a really positive idea when we proposed this, and we had a number of young people willing to start this project with us to develop a video, of which Gabby is joining us here on with you today. So please do ask her some questions. But just to say that, yeah, Gabby was involved in this and a number of other young people, and we had some funding and used, like I said, a production company to support us to develop this, and it's involved a lot of hard work from the young people. We had 9 meetings with young people out of hours to develop the themes and ideas and messages that they wanted to put forward to young people starting this programme, and to kind of develop some kind of story arch and content. So it took a lot of effort to put those themes into a script, of which we then worked with the company to get the visuals and sound and everything. And you'll hear that when you speak to Gabby today, that her voice is the voiceover on the video. Yeah, so, and then obviously some meetings took place with myself and the DBT service to finalise the production. And you know, Gabby and the other young person in the video spent time out of their busy schedules to record the voiceover. And we're really pleased to have been able to show this to you today. So we're welcome to answer any questions about this. And we've had a lot of support from Veronica, of course, as well, in the kind of organisation of how you know, how we support young people to get involved in a project like this.
I think it's absolutely brilliant in that it's very professionally put together. It comes across as very professional, but it's also very sort of accessible. You know, you can identify with it really easily too. So that's great. Has anybody got any questions? Oh gosh, lots. I don't know. Do you want to make a start?
Yes, thanks,
Phil.
Chair, and thank you for that really interesting presentation, because as the Chair said, it did make it very accessible. Maybe I could put a question to Gabby and also to Heather, really, from Gabby, what did you think that you got out of it? Maybe to Heather, how would you measure outcomes from this important training?
Gabby, do you want to go?
I think it helped me experience a bit more of like a professional side to what CAMS is about. Obviously, like at a far lesser extent than actually doing anything with CAMS properly, but it was kind of like more professional, like joining a Teams meeting. It kind of gave those skills of like being punctual, and I don't know, it gave me more confidence, I feel like, to actually go from like being just a like patient to actually kind of looking at it from that kind of perspective and helping other people as well.
That's great.
And I think in terms of what this gives us, what this video gives us, is in terms of how we evaluate that already, you know, we've been using the video and showing young people are about to start treatment, and they really connect with it. I think you can find videos about DBT on YouTube, but a lot of them are American. They're well produced, but they're American. So to have actually local young people with local accents, kind of expressing themselves and what their experiences is like day to day is really allows young people to connect. And I said to Gabby that I showed a young girl a few weeks ago, and after she'd finished watching the video, and I said, "What did you think about that?" And she said, "Oh, you know the girl in the video?" She said, "That's me, that is." And it just brought a tear to my eye, and I shared that with Gabby, who you can say how you felt about that, Gabby.
It made it feel very worth it, like putting that time into doing such a project. It was kind of like, well, yeah, it has made some kind of impact, and that was what I said the whole time. Like if it helps one person once, it's worth doing.
Well done, both of you.
Felt very nice.
Yeah, you brought out that it's two things really. One is being involved in putting this professional thing together and learning the disciplines of doing that. And the other one is how valuable it's proving in the field, as it were. That's great. Sorry, over to you.
Yeah, so Phil actually asked what I was going to ask, but I did want to just say, you know, well done. I think it's a fantastic resource, and I think you've already said, Gabby, you know, if you can demystify, because it's quite a mouthful, as a dialectical behaviour therapy, you know, and coming into mental health services, you know, you can't expect people to understand what that is. So if you can demystify it through this, and it has that impact for young people, then fantastic and well done.
Yes.
I mean, I've not got a question, but I just wanted to say, this is the second time now I've seen it, because we saw the video at the quality committee, and a couple of things that struck me. You watch it the second time and you see more, which indicates the quality of the production. And I think it's really, really clever, but it gets a complicated message over in a really simple way, which is really important. And I think it's got massive impact. I mean, it certainly impacted on me when I seen it, and I think you, all of you that have been involved in it need to be really proud of what you've done. I think it's excellent.
Big question in my mind is, how do we use this effectively, not just within the trust, but with other trusts, certainly locally and maybe nationally? Have we got plans for that, Joe? Oh, sorry, do you want to add something first?
Yes. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Yeah, just two questions really. One is, I don't get a feeling of how long young people are within the programme. And then just referencing the point where the young man said that he's going to go to college, what ongoing support is there for for people at college once they go beyond the adolescent stage?
I think you're asking about recovery there, aren't you? Was that right? So that obviously the programme is up to 6 months long. There are different levels to DBT because, as explained in it, you can have the full intensive programme, but also you can just join the skills group for kind of lower intensity support. So there's different ways we support young people after they've been through the DBT programme. Some young people can be discharged from services and they're good to go, and Gabby is one of those. Some young people might stay within the service and have care coordination and regular reviews, or may continue on some medication. And I think a message I'd like to get across as well is how important this service is for the 16 to 17-year-olds in terms of preventing them going into adult services. And we would really value that being looked at in terms of the longer term planning of services, in terms of how we invest in the kind of 16 to 25 group, where I think there is a gap often in supporting them, and adult mental health services obviously are hugely challenging in terms of waiting lists and so on. So yeah, I think a care coordinator, back to the question, would be thinking about the ongoing needs of the young person and whether that's within the mental health service or education. But we do get, probably about a third of young people who go through the programme don't need anything else.
Okay. Veronica, and then Ben.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, because Heather probably won't, or Gabby, but I'm so aware of the time. It's brilliant to see the end product, but I'm also well aware it's probably taken 12 to 18 months since we first talked about it, Heather, hasn't it? But also, it's been truly co-produced. So we talk about co-production within the trust and what we're doing, and this is something that really has been right from the beginning. To, as you can see, Gabby's on the call now, and the other person's still aware of what's going on as well, that actually it's for me, a real illustration of what true co-production can deliver in terms of quality, but also that aspect for the people all involved in it as well. So it was more a statement than a question, but just to be aware of that, and that actually it's worked really well. And yeah, Heather and Gabby and the other young people, they hung on in there when actually they possibly felt at times like, is this journey never going to end? And they've got not just this video, they've got a shorter video, which is also really good, that was co-produced and delivered, and also leaflets, so the whole package. So I just wanted to flag that up, because I don't think Heather would mention the hard work that was involved in getting it there, and the hard work of the young people involved as well. So yeah, just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thanks, Veronica. Ben?
Yeah, I suppose, and well done to everyone in the video, and I think it does explain a complicated process really well. I suppose just from the board's perspective, I suppose it's just to remember that this is just one part of our CAMHS offer, and when we talk about, when people go to college, Tony, or other areas, that this is part of our suite of tools, and we know we have some challenges around waiting times in some areas in the sort of TYP agenda and we're investing in that. But I suppose that makes me, I'm forever an optimist, David, but with the caution in terms of sharing with others, because we've been very careful that although this is a divine intervention, it's not just a bolt-on that's shoved on the side of the rest of our services. And I suppose we need to be careful when we're sharing that, share our good work, but other people may not implement it in quite the same way.
Yes. You're too bashful. But yeah, I get the point. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Very good. The question really is, how do people access this service, and how do we inform them how they access the service? Whenever may put a rider to that is, what support do we offer for those who find that this service isn't for them, but they still have the ongoing problems?
How they access the service, it's often young people will have been through CAM services for quite some time before this would be offered. I'm going to say, obviously, we've got limited capacity. We're probably reaching about 4% of young people that would benefit from this geographically and through our referrals. So investment in the service is desperately needed. So, but we're trying to make it more accessible by having multi-level intervention. So, and through COVID, we were able to obviously deliver groups online. So a lot of young people can access group delivery and learn the DBT skills, which is fantastic. And I think obviously there's other, I'm not sure the name of the person that was just speaking, but obviously there are other interventions in CAMS as well. But this is the #1 NICE guidelines recommended intervention for young people with severe emotion dysregulation and risk-taking behaviours. But certainly the lower intensity intervention within DBT benefits a lot of young people, some of who are on waiting lists for CBT, for trauma-focused CBT or CBT for anxiety. So we are trying to, enable more young people to access this, but in terms of the full programme, which is what the evidence base is for the kind of more risk-taking young people that are more at risk, we're struggling to meet that need. But any more questions around that, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We're not. We rely on block funding as well for this service. It's not separately commissioned. We've obviously been running since 2015, and every time we make a presentation like this, everybody is so positive and wants to know how can people access this. But the problem is we've just never had the money come forward for that. The kind of sentiment and the hope for how we can develop the service is definitely there across the board, but actually setting it up and commissioning it is something we've not been able to achieve.
Yeah, that's a really important point. But what you are doing is demystifying it. You're making it accessible, and that's a brilliant step in the right direction. Joan, did you want to say something?
Well, yes, that's just prompted me, in view of your remarks just then, Heather, to, as well as echoing what Patrick said about how impressive it is to see it a second. Bring whatever influence we can, the extra funding, further funding, but you would need to extend it more through presumably work funding applications. Is there any measure that we could take to help in that way? Is really my question.
So I think there are opportunities, and obviously we have our so Vicky chairs the mental health thing, just because was partnership board and now the SRO. I think it isn't becoming increasingly challenging there. We know what the system financial position is like, and although the MIS does continue for this year as a system that's committed, increasingly when we're having conversations about investments and services, it's about disinvestment elsewhere. So it is a challenging position. So I'm not saying that we won't continue to advocate, of course we will. but I think at the moment it's difficult to tell. With the sort of coming to the end of the long-term plan, we have an expectation that the MIS will continue, but it's not been confirmed. It's a very tumultuous time that hopefully will become clearer in the next 12 months. But I think as we sit here today, I don't think any of us can see an easy place to call on money.
Okay, but it's making the best use of the money
What
we've got. And this demystifying and accessibility and all that stuff is a step in the right direction. But we've got to be able to follow it up by offering in quantity the services that are needed, that it identifies. So there's the challenge.
I can make one comment here as well, is that there's obviously, in terms of developing services, a great interest in reducing inpatient admission. So certainly I think there's possibilities within the West Midlands Partnership Collaborative, as they're wanting to improve community services to reduce inpatient admissions, because we know inpatient admissions overall are not effective. So that there may be funding possibilities coming in that direction, from what I understand, but nothing's come to light as yet. But I think there's interest. Not just in terms of our trust, but also, across the region in terms of how we develop a DBT service, which we know is recommended in terms of one of the things that can prevent, young people ending up in Tier 4 services.
Yeah, it's a classic one for provider collaboratives.
If anybody can help with that as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Noted. Janet.
Please get in touch.
Thanks very much, Heather and Gabriella, for your presentation today. Heather, we can hear the urgency in your appeal, and it's great, isn't it? We can see Gabriella sitting there, smiling, confident, professional in her delivery of the video voiceover, and a product, an outcome for her of the training, which has been absolutely fabulous. And I think you're right, Heather. This is about stopping people getting into longer-term mental health care. I've seen from personal friends the wonderful outcomes you get from this treatment. A young woman who went through your services a few years ago, married now for 10 years with a baby and running her own business, and we never thought she would get to that. So it does have wonderful outcomes in people's lives. So I think you're right, we need to put some pressure across a wider audience than just this trust to try and prioritise, because we keep talking about prevention as the way forward for mental health and all sorts of medical treatments, and yet we're not concentrating on this element of prevention. So thank you very much for your campaigning work, and I think your voice has been heard, but you know how hard it is, but that shouldn't stop us. Thank you very much.
Great. And it's demystified it for all of us too. Let's not be dishonest about that. And it's brilliant. Look, really, really enjoyed it. Really, really motivated by it. And it's super lovely to see you both. I haven't seen you for a while, Heather, but it's great to see you.
Good to see you, David. Thank you very much for listening to me. And I know it's one of many things that we need to improve across children's services. So I'm particularly passionate about this, but I also know there's lots of other areas that also need investment. But I appreciate that you hear the priority and that you're behind this. So thank you.
Okay, Joe, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just three things. So Gabriella, I'm the director of comms here at the Trust. First of all, of all the teams who understand how difficult it is to get something like this over the line, my team know this, and it is a stunning piece of work. It's the quality of it and the sheer amount of work and the content is absolutely superb. So congratulations to everybody, but not just for the technical delivery, but the perseverance and everything else. That's the first thing. Secondly, David, you asked about how can we raise the profile of this. There's a really, really good opportunity in the next 5-6 weeks, which is on the 5th of July, it's the 75th anniversary of the NHS, and we've been working with the national team at NHS England, who are doing the overall comms for the national campaign, and also with the National Mental Health team in NHS England. And we're putting together an interactive exhibition which involves videos, artifacts, stories, all that sort of stuff, which is going to be promoted nationally, and which also includes virtual reality, augmented reality, a thing called Mental Health Reflections. And the idea is that we have some people talking about the past, some people talking about the present, and some people talking about the future. And we also have a thing called the Vault, where we put things in there to say, this is something you should see, which is really, really good. And we get somebody who wants to put the thing into the Vault to talk about it. Now, this film particularly would be ideal to put into the Vault and just say, have a look at this, this is absolutely superb. And so, Gabriella, if it's all right, we'd love to be able to, over the next 2-3 weeks, if you like, if it's okay with you, and if it's not, it doesn't matter, we'll just put the film up. But have you come in and just do a little talk introducing how it worked and all that sort of stuff and what went behind it, and then we'll put that front and centre into that exhibition, and that will then be part of a national campaign. So that's the second thing. Third thing, and I won't take too much of the board's time. What you probably won't know, Gabriella, is combined the trust itself, we've invested really heavily in our internal comms. So you won't see, but we're looking here on huge, great big digital screens and all of that. We've got particular capability now in-house, no external spend, to be able to films, animations, virtual reality, all this sort of stuff. And we would absolutely love to come and talk with you and the other young people involved in CAMS, to involve you as much as possible in creating as much content as you want, because we've got all the equipment, all the editing equipment, all the filming equipment, and getting young people's voices out there is something we've really passionately wanted to do for ages. So I'm afraid, being useful and creative is a danger, but if it's okay, we'll also talk with you and the other young people at CAMS and Heather with your team about how we can continue and build on this, because it's absolutely superb. But I mean, just hats off to you. It's not often I see a piece of work and think, yeah, it's all right, or I actually look at it and think it's brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant, this film, and you should be really, really proud of yourselves.
Okay, thanks for all that, Joe. So there you go. You've had an impact. Well done, and we won't let it rest at that. Thank you very much to both of you for everything you've done and for today. Brilliant. We need to move on because we're way behind schedule. All right, bye. Okay. Bucky, can we move on to the Reach Award?
With absolute delight and pleasure. This month's Reach Award goes to Jane Underwood, who is the ward manager on Ward 7. I suppose a declaration of interest, it's my ward where I practice, so no surprises that I suppose the narrative here I can vouch is authentic. So Ward 7, for those who may not know, is an 18-bedded ward for older adults, and it's a mixed gender accommodation for short-term assessment. Jane consistently delivers to a standard that lends her to be an outstanding role model amongst her peers, within her team and within the organisation. Jane's compassion, professionalism and ability to lead, ensuring safe, high-quality patient care, along with an environment for patients to receive the best possible care and for staff to develop and grow, makes her worthy of appropriate recognition. Jane is a natural and inspirational leader whose ability to care is phenomenal. Ward 7 has a warm, inviting and caring atmosphere. All staff are approachable, empathetic and responsive, and their dedication to the patients is clear to see. This can be the case whether Jane is on the ward or not, and this is testament to her leadership ability and dedication to her role and her team. Jane's abilities stretch further than her own ward. She supports peers and colleagues without question or hesitation and covers for the older person's matron when required. Jane effortlessly demonstrates all the values each and every day. She leads by example, and the ward environment and staff exude the trust values. Oh, it's absolutely delightful that we can actually do actual clapping rather than virtual today. Thank you, Jane.
But we can't quite present in
Not
person.
yet. Next time.
A virtual presentation. All right, well done, Jane. That's fabulous. Absolutely wonderful. Shall we keep moving forward?
I don't know whether Donna wants to say anything.
Would you like to say anything in response, Jane? Because it shouldn't really just be one-way traffic.
Are you going to put me on the spot now? I'd just like to say, you know, it's so lovely to be recognised, and just because I wasn't expecting it at all. So when I got an email to say that this had happened, I was just like, it just made my day. But hearing it in front of everybody, you know, it's just overwhelming. It's so lovely, and I've sat here thinking, are you actually writing about me? Are you actually saying those things? Because, you know, I just come to work, I get on with things, I do my job and just do, you know, to the best of my ability of what I can do. So just to say a massive thank you for the recognition. It's lovely, so thank you.
Okay. Well done, and it's a delight to see you here amongst us this morning. Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Bookie, over to you now for your report. A little wave as well as a clap.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to take the report as read. There are, I suppose, two possible things that I just wanted to spotlight. The first for me was yesterday, the event that happened yesterday with the Long Service Recognition Award. It was just humbling to see the amount of people who, well, I haven't seen for years because of COVID or because, you know, times have moved on. And everyone was so lovely as well. It was humbling for me, really, and it was a nice occasion. Yeah, that's the first one. And the second one, which isn't so nice, is that I suppose next week, just around the strike action that's happening, and we have our plans in place and everything, but still not a nice thing that's happening next week. I'll leave it there and take any questions that people may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions on the report? Yes.
Yes, thank you for the report, Bucky. And you referred to the delivery and operational plan of the ICS. I wonder whether it would be possible for we had a presentation from officers from the ICS some time back about what their activities were. It would be helpful to maybe a future development board if we could get them to come together to talk just very simply about what the main priorities are of the ICS, what the main delivery actions are, so we could get that first-hand feedback about what's happening. Is that what possible?
I certainly will ask. There's, just by way of an update, there's another session. We had one where all the execs of both NHS and local authority gathered together just to think about the priorities. There's one being planned for next month, and I suppose that's a positive in terms of the culture, not just having an event and leaving it there, but actually taking things forward. But to answer your specific question, I think that's a good idea.
Thank you for that, Bookie.
Okay. Yes, Janet.
Thanks. Thanks, Brookie, for the reports. Lots of really interesting things in here. My question was a bit similar to Phil's, really. I mean, the plan has been signed off, and I know it's had executive review. We've not seen it at all as a board, or had any input from a non-executive point of view. What's the process going forward to make sure that it's looked at from a governance perspective? Because we're part of the delivery, yet we don't really know what's in it, and we haven't been asked about what's in it. So for me, it feels like a gap in governance.
I think you're absolutely right, and just reflecting on it, that's possibly an oversight and something I should check, because my understanding, being part of the ICB board, is that the NEDs on the ICB have an input with all the provider NEDs, but it feels like that's not happening. So again, that's something that I will pick up.
Absolutely, certainly on the people front, there is nothing at all in Staffordshire.
Which is interesting. However, I think there is nothing stopping us or preventing me and others from actually bringing that personally to our board. So
I think it would be really helpful because we're committing to being part of the delivery of that, and yet we really don't know what we're being signed up to. So it just feels uncomfortable.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. It's the same point, really. I think it was well made by Phil and Janet. I feel I have some traction with it because I am connected to the NED that sits on the board, but that seems to be very unusual. When I say connected, I mean we have meetings, you know. But that seems unusual. It doesn't seem to be common practice. And it would be helpful to have somebody describe the plan and also the finances alongside the plan, because we've had an overview of the finances, and actually we've also reviewed them in F&R, but I can't say today I understand how the finances sit alongside the plan. So I think anything that you can do, Bookie, to help us understand all of that would be really good.
Yes. No, I'm just thinking about this stuff as well. Yes, Nikki.
Just to say that we do have an abundance of information and presentations and slides, so I'd be very happy on behalf of Liz to pick up that action, Bookie, if you'd like me to put something together around the operational plan and the strategy. But just to say that the ICB today have opened a digital portal for stakeholders to give feedback on this round of operational planning for this year. So they're very interested to hear from providers particularly through this portal about our experience of the operational planning process this year. So I think that's probably one of several opportunities to be able to give some feedback and help to shape it for next year so it can be better and more inclusive for next year. It's a work in progress, I think, is the message that I hear from planning within the ICB. So I'm sure that contributions to that would be very gratefully received and welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Patrick.
I just wanted to say for completeness, similar to Russell, but perhaps not as robust, that the NEDs who've got a lead for quality and risk have linked up quite a bit across the ICS, although it's more as a development phase than taking things forward. So I've not seen this in that form, but possibly in 12 months' time we would.
Yeah, I'm sort of drifting into my report as well at this point, because I was resisting saying it. But the ICS, ICB, was created and plonked there to look after a certain geographical area. But there was no early definition of how the ICS would relate to individual trusts and work cohesively together. And there have been examples of where that barrier has been broken down and where there is good working. But that's by individual initiatives. And really we need to have a more broad understanding of how the interface works and how it's effective. That isn't there yet, but I will do everything I can to encourage people to look at it in a broader sense. The other thing I was going to mention, apart from yesterday's celebration, which was phenomenal. I won't go over that again. Is that as well as the ICBs, we've also got these animals called provider collaboratives up there, or across there. And I think actually they are very powerful organisations. So there's a provider collaborative of mental health trusts and those involved right across the Midlands. And that way money can be pooled for initiatives. And it's a very, he gets the benefits of scale, if you like, and it attacks some of the problems that individual trusts can't solve themselves. And so the interaction that we're talking about with the ICB, ICS, we ought to have the same approach to these provider collaboratives and forge links that make us a cohesive part of the whole. So certainly we'll both be looking at that over the next month or so. I, from my perspective, Chair, don't want to add anything else, but Joe.
Yes, no, thank you, David, and thank you, Boogie. It was just really a quick follow-up to Janet's point. If we do actually have a presentation by the ICB or the ICP or ICS here at a future board development, I'm just wondering if it would be helpful to have a particular part of it which includes the green agenda as well, simply because that particular aspect of the green plan is something which goes right the way across the whole ICP, and it's, you know, that kind of joined up thinking is really important. So if we do have it, could we make sure we have somebody from the ICP who could actually reflect on that as well, please?
Okay, yes, noted, got it. We'll do that. We're almost at the 10-minute break, I think, because we have no questions from the public, which we referred to earlier. Sorry, Jen, that your orange box is so large, I didn't see it. Yeah.
You're mute, Jen.
But your voice is so small.
This is so disconcerting. I'm desperately trying not to pick my nose. I really hope there was lots of people. It wasn't just going to be me in the end. So I hope it's not throwing the meeting slightly wobbly. And I don't want to delay the break, because that's the worst thing to do is make a contribution when the chair's just said we're going to take a break. That's all you're thinking of now. But I guess just a little bit to add to the conversation about ISB, the system, and the provider collaboratives. I mean, I guess it's a question is how much we think it's useful for our staff as an important stakeholder to understand and have some grasp of this. Because to be honest, staff have little understanding, and there is little. And I even struggle with my trade union colleagues to get them invested in this. I mean, people refer to the system, and that just sounds sinister, doesn't it? The system sounds like something from a dystopian movie or something, you know. And it's a question of actually, do our staff really, rank and file staff, need to understand that? Well, does it in a sense matter or not? And it's a question maybe that can be taken to the ICCS and the ICB. And if so, how do we engage them? And there's, you know, we've talked a bit about comms in the room, and maybe we've got the facility to do some comms piece, because the vast majority of staff just don't understand this at all, and they just hear this, you know, I mean, you know, I'm sure some still think they work for North Staffs Health Authority, which is who I worked for when I started. So it's just a question really, because I'm struggling to get engagement from my colleagues on this. You know, we're all too busy dealing with the stuff within our own providers, but it is the bigger picture going forward that we need people to be more understanding of how the system, how the situation is working locally. And if so, it's a question back to the ICS and the ICB is, how do we start to engage that? Because at the moment, I don't really see any effort to engage with staff within the providers, unless I'm missing something.
No, it's the staff, it's the boards, it's everybody. There's a bridge to be built, and there are bits of it in place, but it's not across the whole range that it needs to be. Absolutely right. I think we're all saying that today, and we'll all work on that and carry it to our colleagues at the system level and at the provider collaborative level, because I still have big hopes for that. Yeah.
So,
Sorry, Phil.
You went the double error of speaking before the break, but I can be very short, because actually I did attend the meeting of the audit chairs at ICB. One of the points made by the chairs there was that the NHS isn't always very good at communication. It's good at over-communicating. So therefore, what we probably want to know, and probably what the staff want to know, what are the 6 or 7 things of child priorities, and what are the 4 or 5 delivery objectives? Quite simple and crisp, not a death by PowerPoint. So I think that will be my kind of hint for where the kind of information flow, both for non-execs and also for staff as well.
And we've seen today that communication is a flexible thing, and it can be very, very effective if you get it right. And it can be absolutely a useless barrier if you can't. Can we please have our break?
If you say so.
All right. Look, it's 11 o'clock. Nearest damn it. So 10 minutes, and then we'll start up again. Great. Thank you. let's move on. Safer staffing, inevitably. Sorry, Kenny.
Chair.
Come on, sit down. Calm down.
So, yeah, I'll take the report as read. Been reviewed, the quality committee is here for assurance. The headlines that I pick out was that we achieved a 100% fill rate overall, which is that we managed to have all the staff on shift that we planned to, which is good news. And for registered nurses, again, 77.8% fill rate, which is again improved from last month, which is good. Cautionary note with that is that although performance is good, we have still got an underlying vacancy position, so we're achieving those fill rates through the use of temporary staffing. We've got the usual checks and balances in terms of induction and making sure that those staff are well trained and inducted to mitigate those risks. A couple of other things just to say is that the areas that are using most temporary staffing are have been Ward 6 and Darwin during the last month, and I won't say more about that. In terms of looking ahead and the forecast around recruitment, we've talked about it here before, but we are hopeful that in October, November time, we should have very few registered nurse vacancies, which is a great position to be in, and the staff that are started in March and April are now deployed onto the wards, and that's some of the background to the improved performance we're seeing. Nothing else that I wanted to pick out, thank you, Chair, but happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm looking more avidly for hands up. But yes?
Thanks, Chair. I'm not hiding in the corner here.
Yeah, you are. You must be.
Thank you for the report. It's very helpful. And, it's good that you're saying that the RM vacancies will look better as the year ends. Because the vacancies, as it stands compared to previous ones, look quite high, relatively speaking, both on HCSW and RNs. Is that the normal pattern for this time of year, or is there something different at the moment?
Yeah, so there is a slight underlying explanation for some of that is that we have had new investment this year. Right. So what happens is when we've got service developments that come on board, we obviously increase our overall whole-time equivalents, and there's a gap before we fill them. That's some of the explanation about the vacancies, but not all of it. We have still got an underlying vacancy factor, which again, later on in the year we'll address through recruitment, because we've expanded our nursing cohorts and recruitment, and we've already identified people for those posts where we've got vacancies. Just waiting for them to qualify.
That's great, thanks for that.
Can anybody comment on something that's not specific to this trust at all, I hope, which is I go around and see other trusts, and we talk about safer staffing and how near they are to getting adequate levels. And very quietly sometimes they say, well, actually, we haven't got the money to finance full staff. We've got into a habit of running at 70% or whatever it is, 75%. If we were suddenly to fill all those vacancies, we'd run out of money in no time. Is that a fair comment when they say that to me? Or is it doesn't feel right?
Well, I'm sure I won't speak
I'm not
for
attributing
Eric.
this to anybody.
I won't speak for Eric in terms of finance, but yeah, I'm sure that if we were to run at full vacancy, zero vacancy across all of our posts, that may provide us with a challenge, but I'm sure Eric probably explained that in more.
It wasn't especially.
It will be a challenge in certain organisations. So a big part of the underspend, or a big part of the plan really this year for the system, is to factor in a vacancy factor. And based on the fact that we knew we were hopefully going to be more or less at full employment from later on this year, we rejected that kind of offer from the ICS. But UH&M particularly and MPFT have got 3.5% vacancy factor built into their numbers, and obviously they are achieving that. And I suppose just based on what Kenny said before, it's really important to know, I think, that our nursing numbers have not reduced, but that's the way it sort of plays out in Kenny's report, because our overall vacancies have grown because we've had investment now when we fill that investment, which what we've planned for. And we will see growth in our pay bill as we go through the year, and obviously, hopefully, the reduction in agency nurses is what we're counting on.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, got that. Yes, thank you.
The big
Yes,
hands.
big hands, please. Can we have big hands, please?
Yeah, thanks for the report, Kenny. Just a question really about Darwin. Darwin seems to be a particular issue. Is it purely acuity, or is there other issues, behind it? Because I noticed a very high level of agency, for instance. Is there an underlying issue there?
Yes, thank you, Tony. So the board is aware that we have had an unusual set of circumstances at Darwin where we are accommodating as an individual which we wouldn't usually provide care for, and that is the major driver behind most of the agency. There are other children and young people there who are requiring additional staffing as well, but that is the major focus of that spend.
Right, so basically it's security, so it's not something underlying that we should worry about.
No.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's important to note as well, Kenny, I think I'm right saying that it's reducing quite at a
Yes.
really good rate, so that is only a short-term issue for us.
Thank you.
Yes, Joan.
Yes, no, thanks. Thanks for the report. And I mean, I think we are being assured that the vacancy issue is beginning to look healthy, whatever the issues might be about the finances of it. But just one small aspect of it, just looking ahead to the future and the wonderful partnership that we've got with Keele. And I know the talks are ongoing now between Liz as Director of Strategy with Staffordshire University. Is there any opportunity for us to have perhaps at board future a sort of progress report on what opportunities there might be that perhaps we could dovetail to some of the areas where there might be specific long-term concerns in terms of getting that training going forward?
Can I just add a sentence to the end of that, which is, are we sure that it's the trusts dealing with the universities and further education colleges, or is it the system that is leading this discussion? Because I'm a bit confused.
Yeah, so I can offer a response in terms of the clinical staffing. So where we identify that we've got clinical staffing requirements in terms of workforce planning, we've got those established links with both Staffordshire and Keele. So quite a few years ago now we expanded placement from Staffordshire University to make sure we offer those for nurses, and we're seeing some of the benefits of doing that in terms of delivering the nursing workforce. For other clinical workforce roles, we're also speak to Keele and Staffordshire as kind of our nearest HEIs. So that is in place. But I think in terms of the wider strategic point, I think it's well made, and I think it would be worth kind of revisiting.
And I was trying to put into the conversation, is there a workforce plan for the system which is driving this as well, or has that not been published?
Paul, I don't know whether you wanted to come in there in terms of the workforce planning across the system.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say we're not where we need to be from a workforce planning perspective yet. I think we develop workforce plans, and this is, I think both internally and across the system, we tend to develop on the needs of the operational planning cycle, and that's where we focus. And this year has been a particularly challenging year for all the reasons that we've talked about previously, to get those numbers in the right place. But I think there's a recognition, and we've talked as an exec team. Bucky and I talked about it in my PDR only last week around how we start to get into that longer term. I think we try and do the longer term stuff, but we need to properly get into that sort of 5 year hence approach. What the services are likely to look like then, and it's never going to be perfect, is it, 5 years hence? But from there we can start to invest. Like the board took the decision to invest in apprenticeships, a couple of 3 years ago, and that as we've heard, it bears fruit. To actually plan that properly, we need to invest in some competency-based workforce planning that built on some sort of predictability around like demand and the sort of structure of the workforce that we want to deliver that demand into the future, what that would look like. So we can really then build that into the, with the operation, alongside the operational plan, because that's where it really comes from, alongside the financial plan, we can really bring that together to make a comprehensive approach. And it is doable, but it will take us a little bit of time to get there. But that's where we're trying to get. And I think system-wide, we're not in that place. I think MPE UFT, are probably in a better place than the rest of us in the system, because they invested in that sort of many years ago. I think we were investing it when I was there. Going that far. So it's in a slightly different place. So there's some learning there from them that we can get. But I think getting into that place is where we need to go to now.
Okay, Janet.
I think Joan was before me, actually, David.
I don't mind the order.
Joan, then.
Can I just say, building on what Paul's just said, Chair, just for me to repeat the importance of us linking with the SIP, the the Skills Investment Plan, which the Chamber of Commerce is in the process of submitting to government for the 5-year plan for the strategic plan for skills investment for the area. It'd just be wonderful if we could get health embedded into that.
And I've got another hat where I'm a governor at the FE College in Stoke, and it's wearing that hat. Do I go and talk to Combined and then UHNM and then somebody else and then somebody else, or do we have something that pulls it all together and designs courses to meet the workforce needs? And I know where I'd rather sit actually on that with that hat on. Anyway, there we go. But I think the system needs to.
And I think we'll move in that direction. Yeah. I think that's inevitable in terms of consolidating resource, particularly most of the resource. I think it's inevitable that we move educationally into a pooling of resources and approaches, because we can't keep affording to do everything done individually. It's not sustainable.
There's things called benefits of scale. Sorry, Janet.
It was just a point from a university's perspective. Often universities limit the number of people they put onto courses because they can't guarantee placements for them. So, for example, at MMU we have a huge nursing school, but we're limited if we can't find placements for students. So having that relationship with medical institutions is really helpful for the university to plan. And we're always looking 4 or 5 years ahead, aren't we, for that from that point of view. So I think, and I'm sure Bucky from being at Wolverhampton, exactly the same thing. So if we don't make those relationships and jointly plan what we can take, what the universities can deliver, we're not going to have a perfect outcome. And I think it could be much better if we started working 3 and 4 years out from what we need in those years.
Mm-hmm. Let's try and move on. Rather like the floral decorations around here, the discussion about safer staffing has bloomed in all directions. So well done. Safeguarding. Can we move to safeguarding?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Again, colleagues are familiar with this report, Safeguarding Adults and Children. It's for Quarter 4, here for assurance, and has been discussed at Quality Committee. So just a few things to pick out of the report. Our safeguarding training compliance for Level 3 children unfortunately hasn't met the target at Q4. There's been a number of issues that sit behind this, including staff availability, including some issues with the training itself. However, we have improved, albeit less than I'd have hoped since Quarter 3. There is additional capacity being supplied in terms of achieving that target, and we are seeing that improvement since this last quarter, and we'll see that coming through in the next report. Although we have fallen below target, as I've mentioned, there are a number of mitigations in place to reduce, and you'll see those in the report. Predominantly the fact that the teams are accessing regular safeguarding supervision, and we are having a high number of contacts and queries to the safeguarding team from clinical services. So that sort of demonstrates, actually, although we've got some issues with training compliance, the team is very well accessed and people are using it to get supervision. And then the final thing, just to say, around the referral rate again, which is another, I think, a piece of assurance for the board, is that the referral activity from our clinical teams is sustained and in fact it increased in some areas. So we can demonstrate that our staff are aware of safeguarding risks to people who use our service and their families, and they are aware it's necessary raising those referrals to colleagues to do investigations and access multi-agency support. They're the things I would pick out of the report, but again, happy to answer questions that colleagues might have.
Okay, any questions around the table? Not seeing any hands. Yes, I am. Okay.
Not so much a question, just an observation, and that's about the level 3 safeguarding children's training. The graph on page 6. The issue seems to be there's a high level of unallocated places on courses, so it's not necessarily course capacity that's the issue. I think it's the do not attend, the people that were expected to attend, which I appreciate is down to staff availability. It's only a question whether putting on more courses is the answer, because as I say, you've got the capacity that isn't being used.
Yes, so thanks Tony, absolutely agree. So in Q4 we put on the additional capacity, and what you're seeing is people not taking them up. So what we are doing is making it more accessible to people. We're doing, so previously what we had is a system where people they reported they found it more difficult to access. So we're doing more on Teams, and we're being supported by that directors to free more staff up to attend. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The issue isn't capacity, it's about making sure we enable people to get there. So we're not putting it any more on from the Q4 forwards. What we've done is put more on during Q4, and that's what you're seeing in the graph.
Okay, are we done? Thank you very much. Move on to Dennis. I always feel sorry for you, Dennis, because you get serious incidents and mortality. Not much to laugh at.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So the SI report this time covers both Q4 and the annual report, comparing the previous year and this year. Of course, Q4 covers January to March 2023, and the report also shows the trends that have been noted. Just of note, in Q4 we had a slightly reduced SI compared to same period last year, so we had 23 last year and 14 this year. But in general, when we look at the annual report, the trends show that the highest reporting areas are CDAS, which is the alcohol services, and the Sutherland Centre. There are no specific themes, but all the incidents meeting the criteria are investigated, and any recommendations are fed back to the teams for implementation and shared through learning lessons. That's all I'm going to mention about the report. I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, anybody any comments on the SI report? No, that's great, Dennis. Thank you. And mortality.
So the mortality surveillance, this relates to deaths of patients who have not met the criteria for serious incidents, and these are patients who have died from natural causes. And so we review the deaths to look at whether the care provided was of a good standard. And in this report, all the reviews show that the deaths and the care they received ranged from excellent to adequate, and there are no cases of any poor care. 2 of the cases related to physical health and alcohol-related issues. And that's all I wanted to mention about the report. Questions?
So, no areas of particular concern. Any questions for anybody? Operation Catch-up. Thank you very much. Brilliant. Now, Laurie, committee effectiveness. How do you want to deal with this?
So I'll just give a brief overview of what we've done, and then I'd like to invite the chairs of the committees to just give a bit of a reflection
Okay.
on the findings. annual assessment of effectiveness. It's very comprehensive. There's lots of detail in there. And I suppose the most important part of the reports is the chair's reflective piece. So I'd like to hand over to the chairs, and it might just be easy to go round that way, if you're happy. Janet, go first.
No problem at all. Let's find my committee report. Always an interesting process, this, and very helpful, I think, to have the feedback. I think the disappointing one for us was the fact that we had such a small return. 16 people were given the survey to complete and only 6 did. I know for some of them it was to do with either illness or absence, but it's valuable to have this feedback, and we're not going to improve if we don't have it. But the feedback was generally positive, which is encouraging. I think the main trend that comes out of the commentaries is one that we've had in prior years, which is we only meet every other month, and we have an enormous agenda to get through, and sometimes it means that we have to gallop a bit to cover it. So we need to think about, one of the things we're thinking about is, do we add some additional time-out sessions for people committee so that we can just take a particular subject. For example, we've done it this year with the people plan, where we've added additional 2-hour session and an additional hour session just simply to go through the people plan, because we wouldn't have got it done in committee and done it justice. So that might be a way forward without trying to do a meeting for everybody every month, bearing in mind particularly the pressure on executive time. The other areas that came up, clinical representation on the committee. Well, we always have Dennis, which is great. We have Ben from time to time. And actually, this isn't a committee that Kenny sits on, so it would be unfair to add him into it. But I think sometimes if there's something particularly that we feel is of relevance, we should at least get some input from Kenny into the meeting. We struggled this last year with terms of with objectives, if you like. The objectives we had in the last people plan were not actually measurable. So we've sort of looked at them every meeting and said, I don't think there's anything we can say about this, but we have sort of kept it under review. With the new people plan, I feel much more confident that KPIs gives us something actually to work towards. We also said it would be nice if we could meet face-to-face a couple of times a year, because I think endlessly on Teams doesn't encourage the sort of interaction around the committee that's useful. Even the coffee break, you can clear an awful lot of things up in a coffee break, can't you? So I think that was fine. The audit committee's looked at it. I'm sure that if Phil has any comments, he'll let me have the overall disappointing response in terms of numbers, good response in terms of content, but some things we can look at to change going forward.
Thank you, Janet. Do you want to take questions at each point, or
Yes, I think we should. Anybody got any reaction or questions to Janet's report?
Well, I could raise this at any point really, but it's just in response to Janet's point about not enough respondents, and I just wondered if there'd been a bit of confusion about that, because actually most of the committees only have 6 members, don't they? And then there's attendees, and I just wondered whether it's possible that some of the attendees hadn't realised that they were supposed to be responding. You're going to tell me that's not the case, aren't you?
You're absolutely right.
Oh, right, okay.
Because I think the response to all of them is not what we would like. I think there's improvements to be made. When I've asked my specific staff, say, have you done it? I said, I don't think it was for me.
Right.
Well,
so you could make that message clearer.
yeah, and I said, well, it was sent to you. That was the whole point, because last
clue
year
there,
it wasn't sent to the people to do it.
There's a clue.
We just need to really.
Well, that's a quick win, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, good.
This isn't something we've done comprehensively before, is it?
We've done it each year, but we've gone into further detail this time.
Yeah, okay. And not everybody's caught up with, kept up with that change. No, I haven't. That's all right, don't worry, I'll tell you later. But you know, it's a very healthy, encouraging does spotlight areas where we need to make further progress. So as an exercise, it's really important. But we've got a bit of work to do to get it right. Okay, shall...
Possible?
All right, okay. Fine, so the responses, my summary is in the pack. One of the points I make right at the start is that, and probably similar to most of the committees, we have a real breadth of issues and areas that we have to cover. So for the finance and resources, it's finance, it's performance, the performance metrics and data quality, it's estates, it's business opportunities and digital. And that really creates, potentially anyway, within the committee, two challenges. One is to stay within that brief, really, because it's a broad enough brief as it is, without expanding it out into other areas. And secondly, within that, to make sure that some of those areas don't get lost because they come last on the agenda, or they don't quite, excite the committee in the way that some of the other areas are. So an example, not the only example of that, would be digital, which traditionally is towards the end of the agenda, and therefore means that sometimes it's just squeezed in terms of time and so on and so forth. So there's an issue of staying within the parameters of the committee, but making sure that we give visibility to each of the areas, and also making sure that any gaps and key risks, gaps in control and key risks, are sufficiently visible. And a good example of that would be Chrysalis. We keep Project Chrysalis under review, and we do that on a monthly basis. But what we've not tended to do is to see alongside that the issues of PFI, until suddenly we had an issue that was PFI related, that was part of Project Chrysalis. So there's a need just to consider how we properly ventilate the real key risks, rather than just getting bogged down in this is the standard agenda, this is the one that we're going to follow. So those were the two key areas I picked out in my report. I think there's an additional point that didn't come up quite so much through the responses, but is something I'm aware of because chairs discussed this, and it's also come out, I think it came out in the last private board, is because we tend to see business development opportunities first in finance and resources, we need to make sure that the information is being shared elsewhere. And I think one of the ways we can do that is through the assurance report to the board. So I will give attention to that, supported by Laurie and other people, to make sure that the assurance report that comes back from finance and resources is giving other people that don't sit on that committee sufficient visibility of things that we're discussing, because we see those developments early. And there's been a real effort on the part of officers to improve the quality and quantity of information in papers. I think that's been really good, actually. And that's been often initiated by the officers themselves. So I just wanted to note the fact that that's been a real area of progress, but it's something we just need to keep working on. So those were the points I was pick up. Happy to take any questions on that, or further comments from people that sit on that committee.
Well done.
Good.
Thank you, Russell. Phil?
Okay, thank you. I mean, it's very helpful exercise, and I think probably we just wanted to pick up three areas, really. I mean, first is actually an understanding of what the committee is about, because the audit committee is a technical committee. Also, when we hit the account season, which we're in now, it actually does require of all of us a pretty good understanding of what the accounts are around, what to look for in the accounts. So I think one of the messages that I want to take forward is around ensuring that we have some sort of refresher training, so everybody is familiar with what the scope of this committee is and what it is not, because the audit committee is essentially not a decision-making committee. It's not something which actually operationalises things. It's actually a review committee. So it's actually getting that understanding, but also particularly prior to the account season, if we could maybe have a session whereby the technical aspects are covered off, so that we're well equipped to ask the kind of questions which will be challenging with the accounts. I think there's two other areas as well. One is around, there is a mirroring between the F&R committee and the audit committee. So we need to think about that, because the same members are on the FPR committee, on the audit committee. Actually, it's works pretty well as I have, but I think looking from the outside, somebody could perceive that it was the F&R committee marking its own homework. So we do need to think about how we mitigate that. I mean, it's a point that Eric's been discussing with me for a while, and I've probably, in all honesty, sat off it for a while because I don't see any, there haven't really been any problems, but I do think we do need to grasp that now. And I think the other one was probably an innovation, which I've talked to the other chairs around, which other audit committees elsewhere do, which is to ask the audit chairs of each committee to come along to one audit committee during the year and actually set out how they are fulfilling the terms of their reference. So that will give the audit committee further assurance about the control mechanisms which are in place throughout the trust. And there's one from me, which is basically to actually keep on top of the actions rather better than I do in some rights development. So I'll do that this year.
Thank you, Phil. Any questions for Phil?
No question, just an observation really. The audit committee is the only committee where it has external representation as part of the committee, isn't it?
Yes, you're right.
And that changed the dynamics
No,
of
you're right.
the committee.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is, and it'd be good to get their views out today. I don't know whether we've got any feedback from our external and internal external.
Were they invited to complete the effectiveness review?
Lisa might have to divert to you for that. They were, yes.
They were.
I guess there was a comment about the length of the audit reports and whether we could have better summaries. I mean, I'm content with the length of them because I think a lot of the detail, but I think the summaries could be more helpful perhaps.
I suppose on that point, Phil, we are in the process of changing to a new set of internal auditors who will have their new style and all the rest of it, so we perhaps need to feed that into when they start.
Thanks, Phil. Patrick?
Just before you do, just careful with the cable.
Yeah, with the microphone.
Yeah,
Thank you.
But
Technical edge.
Thank you.
Yeah, if, I mean, I made the comment, but it's been made on a number of occasions about the number of respondents. Again, it was very small. I think what the review told us that was generally the committee seems to be functioning okay, or the members thought it was functioning okay. The attendance is okay. The timeliness and things is good. There are a number of areas I think where we could make some improvements or are challenging. I think sometimes the agenda can be overwhelming and leads to very detailed reports and detailed reporting. I mean, that isn't unique to the Quality Committee combined, I'm afraid. I've checked that out in the past. And there's possibly a bit of a lost opportunity with the directorates. We have regular representation with the directorates. One of the meetings focuses purely on the directorates or predominantly on the directorates. And I think we're all agreed that there needs to be slightly more structure to that because we're missing something as a result of that. And we do okay with it, but it could be better. What I think came out of it is a number of things that possibly we need to do is one, is to sit down and review the information that we've got in front of us. And we agreed this at the last Quality Committee, and possibly to do that on a face-to-face basis, because some of the feedback was that there were no face-to-face meetings, and perhaps every so often that would be a good idea. I think the second point is, I think there are a number of issues that are across subcommittee that track across committees and need to be addressed probably by more than one committee. And although we meet as chairs, whether we've got a robust assurance system about that, I think is an area where we the third area I think we need to do is we need to revisit just how we structure the presentations and the feedback from the individual directorates. But nothing else to say on that really, in case, unless anybody's got any questions.
Thanks, Patrick. Any questions? No. James? Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I was just going to make an observation, one that I think Eric would. I think the observation is, I've heard Patrick say we do okay, and I think you describe that as okay. Just to encourage us that we okay is not good enough for us. We need to aim to be outstanding in all we do and how we do it.
That's why I had the 3 actions, Vicky.
Smart reply.
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you, Laurie. I'd like to start with a heartfelt apology to the committee because for reasons which I cannot explain, I overlooked sending my chair's reports of the effectiveness. And I can't apologise enough for that. And I'm really sorry. I don't know whether or not it was exacerbated by the fact that I was away on holiday the week before, and I thought I'd checked with somebody that I'd filled in all the things that I needed to fill in, so I went away with a clear conscience, but I do apologise. I think, you know, charitable fund is just different from all the other committees so far because it's not something where we've got a clear way forward, and I think that the comments that we've had reflect that, and I'm really grateful for those comments, and actually to Lisa as well for all the work that's actually been done to get us to where we've got some of the ducks in place, and now we need to go forward. Just looking at the different comments that have come through, and then summarised in my report, which I take it you've all read anyway, I think it just comes back to this thing about what do we want as a trust to do with our charitable trust fund, and a very helpful board development session that we had where we said that we would go to UHM, and I just hope that in the 12 months coming we can start to make that bear some fruit in terms of actually getting the structure right. I can report a very, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul and Laurie and the other Lisa who was in on the call, a very, I think, constructive meeting with UHM on Monday this week, which was basically subject to sign off by Tracy and others that there would be a real eagerness to look for collaboration in the way that we want to do. So I think that will positively shape the effectiveness as we go forward. I think the challenge, some of the challenges that are reflected in all the red comments about, you know, the chair not really having the resources or the resources not being there to do what we want to do, that's not going to go away, because even I think with input from UHM, we're going to require a joined up link with all the different work of this trust across all the different departments to see what advantages and opportunities will arise from having, hopefully, a viable charitable fund. Mindful of always Eric's concerns that at the moment, as things stand, we're not raising the funds sufficient to be able to have a long-term future. So I think we're very clear what the barriers are now. We basically, and those barriers are actually about the resources and the capacity. So it's not that somebody's going to come in and do everything for us. Somebody can come in and bring expertise, but then we have to say, what as a trust do we want? And I think, you know, that the committee effectiveness responses that we've had, they highlight the fact that we haven't got a clear sense of, we don't know what our purpose or our priority is. So I do hope that with the UHM developments there, we can start to weave those in, and with Paul's leadership on this, we can link that in and be more very specific. But I think there are opportunities, but I think we need to get a priority as to what we want to do with it. What do we want to be raising money for? And that involves all of us, not just the charitable fund committee as such.
Thank you, Joan. Any questions for Joan? Great. I've skipped somebody very special.
Well, no. I was enjoying that. Remco, shall we just talk about Remco for a few minutes?
Oh, sorry.
No, go on.
No. It's a general comment, so go on to Remco. Sorry, David.
All right. Is that hanging over me? Remco's a bit different from all the others, isn't it? The makeup is different. It sort of stands to one side a little bit, or has done in the past. And shamefully, in a sense, Remco has met when it needed to meet to approve certain changes. A sort of ad hoc committee. And we've recognised that that's just not right, that the Trust needs to have policies about a number of things involving remuneration. It needs to have a cycle of business and regular meetings that support that cycle of business. And so over the last year, Remco has been going through that change with a few sort of bumps along the way, but it's getting there now, and there is a policy, and we have a session after this today, when I would like to think we will have just about landed where we want to get to in terms of a properly constituted, regular clarity about the responsibilities and a sort of a clearly defined programme of decisions that need to be made each year. And we're well on the way to that. But sometimes when you're trying to make changes, somebody will come up with a paper and then you'll say, well, yeah, half of that's right, but the other bit hasn't quite got to where we need to get to. And we've been going through that process over the last year. So I think what I would say for Remco is rather than focus too much on the last year or so, because things are changing so fast, I'd like to plug in 3 or 6 months' time a separate review of Remco and where it's got to, and hopefully be able to give you then that full assurance that it's playing its full part as it should do, as a regular part of the structure. But I'm afraid, looked over this area for some time and done nothing about it. But this year is different. So there we go. So can I leave it a bit vague like that? We will do some more work this afternoon, and we will come back to you with an update on Remco, where it is, and what, if anything, needs still to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
No questions, right. There's one over there.
Yeah, more general comments, really, not related to Remco. First of all, I think we ought to thank Lisa and Laurie and anybody else that was involved in this, because I mean the turnaround was phenomenal. I personally didn't think it was achievable, and I was chased somewhat by Lisa to get my things in. But I think it was. I think you just did a brilliant job on it. So well done. Thanks for that.
Absolutely.
I think that should be acknowledged. My second point is really a question, which is: are you looking at it to see if there are any common themes? That's the bit that's missing at the moment, I think. So will there be a pulling out of common themes? And linked to that, I think it would be really helpful if we review the questions now, rather than wait for a year and then say, do we need to change the questions? Because it's still fresh in our minds, really. So I don't know how you want to do that, whether you just want to do that with the chairs, but because we've changed the questions, haven't we? So I just think a quick review of those at some point through some method would be helpful.
Leave that with me and Lisa, we'll get something sorted.
Thank you.
But all this feels like a move in the right direction to better governance.
Just really an observation that we have very long gaps between reviewing our performance as board, and Russell will know this because he sat on the same board as I do in the past, where we ask each board, we give randomly a questionnaire for people to fill on just feedback on how the board meeting went for the chair and the chief executive. And I think it's really valuable because otherwise and having chaired the board occasionally, you chair the board, everybody goes, oh, thanks very much, and you think, well, how was that, anybody? So I think it's just really helpful, I think, sometimes to say what we feel goes well around the board table, because it allows us to develop a sort of different relationship when we're in a meeting than we have out of the meeting. So just a thought, I think, for rounding this off, but the cherry on the top is, should we be looking at how we act in our own committee, if you like?
It's a good point, Janice.
Yeah.
Pick that up.
Right. Okay. I think we need to try and move on if we can, because we're a little bit behind the pace. We're over to Patrick, aren't we, on the Quality Committee now?
Yeah, this is the regular report to the Trust Board and the Quality Committee. And it's, as members of the board know, it's a bi-monthly cycle between things that are more trust-wide and things that are more directorate-wide, and this was the more trust-wide. I mean, the meeting started with a patient story that we've had this morning, which, I don't really want to say anything else on. I mean, it was just excellent and set the sort of framework for the meeting. If you're looking at the report, there's a number of items that really provided information to the committee. The first being some information about the system, which is report by exception, and there was a potential incident there relating to IT that was resolved very quickly, so I won't dwell on it. The CQC update, I think, is quite important, given that it demonstrates how, as an organisation, we try and learn from what other organisations have experienced around the CQC, and certainly very close to us, the CQC have been very active in Staffordshire, so we've been reviewing some of our practices to see how we compare really, and how we seek assurance in terms of issues that may be common across the patch really. We had a very helpful presentation. It's the second presentation we've had on the patient safety incident response framework. This is a fairly major change really nationally to the way that we trusts and organisations will look at patient safety and look at how we manage incidents, how we report incidents, and how we review those incidents. And I think we gained some assurance there that the project and the programme is well in hand. And we did get a briefing on the clinical situation at the Darwin Centre, but I'm not going to go into any more detail at the public board around that. I can give further information this afternoon if necessary. We scrutinised a number of, and just so I think it's added assurance to the board, we scrutinised a number of reports that have been here this morning, so we considered safe staffing, safeguarding, the SUR report, mortality surveillance, as well as the committee effectiveness of the board. In terms of assurance, you'll note the summaries around learning from experience, infection prevention and control, and the annual report around restrictive practice. And there are some clear links between learning from experience and restrictive practice, because the former tells us about the number of incidents we have, the latter tells us about how we manage particularly violence, seclusion, rapid tranquillisation in the organisation, and it gives in my view, gives a high level of assurance about that, how that's done, and how we're able to be assured about what we're doing for the benefit of the patients, but also in terms of professional and statutory requirements that we may have. And in terms of infection prevention and control, I suppose the major issue that we picked up was it sort of disappointing the number of vaccinations this year, which has been a national issue. We approved the quality account, which all members of the board have had sight of. And in terms of review, we reviewed the risk register and the IQPR, and also I'm asking if the board can approve the policy. There's one policy for 3 years, which is to do with psychotic medication medication, if our memory serves me correctly, a high dose antipsychotic therapy. If the board could approve that or ratify that and minute it accordingly. I've nothing else to say. If any colleagues or anything, if there were also at the committee of any other comments, that'd be very welcome. And happy to try and answer any questions that anybody may have.
Okay, thanks ever so much. Any questions, first of all? Yes, sorry. Something.
Thank you for the report,
tunnel vision,
Patrick. I was interested in what the learning from experience report, where you say there's been a very marked increase in violence and aggressive incidents within Q4, which is largely the result of a small number of patients. Could you say something about the nature of those incidents and how we're seeking to address and mitigate potential for that continuing in the future?
I mean, I'll probably ask Kenny for a bit more information, but I can come out with the headline. I think you will naturally see increases like this on a quarter by quarter basis, and the reason for that is that what the majority, if you look at the incidents and when you analyse the incidents as the report does, the vast majority of incidents tend to be the result of a small number of patients in specific areas, which tends to be the Derby Centre we've talked about before, the PICU for obvious reasons, and Ward 3. So it's a small number of patients. So if you get a small number of patients with particular challenges or particular difficulties, the numbers would go up. I think the broader point to make is if you look at the numbers over the last 12 months, they've actually reduced rather than gone up. But that would be my initial response. I don't know if Kenny wants to add anything.
Yeah, so I would completely agree with what you said, Patrick. We do see this kind of unpredictable trend, if you like, which is often quite spiky in terms of how you see it on the chart. Where we would be more concerned is if we saw, like Patrick said, a continual rise or a number of rises, and as Patrick said, that unpredictable nature of the trend is associated with a small amount of service users. If we had a rising trend that went over a longer period of time and increased, then we would do much more of a deep dive. But we are satisfied because we've got a group that looks in detail at all of these incidents, that we can't see a kind of trend, and we can't attribute it to a cultural issue we wouldn't want, practice that isn't what we would aspire to, and those sorts of things. It does tend to be small numbers of patients who, fortunately, that reduces because of the treatment they get.
So it's a spike rather than a trend.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? No.
Jamie's got a question.
Ah, a small hand, but now we have you in full. Yes, over to you, Jim.
Oh yeah, small hand and a big head. Just it's interesting, that's a conversation about the violence and aggression, and I certainly remember a time in my career where it was a daily occurrence, and it is and it is good, that analysis, to see that analysis, that it is the reason why it changes is because particularly with certain patients and service users. The one question of that is, yeah, that's useful to know, but are we assured that where those staff groups where they are facing that level of violence, which is out of the ordinary, that those staff teams are extra supported in that environment? Because I know from experience how dehumanising it can be for all parties, both the patients and the staff, where a level of violence and aggression becomes almost set in. And that would be the question. So I think we do really well now in supporting staff who have been subject to violence and aggression, but it's just a concern when you've got these hotspots about how we're extra supporting the team in those circumstances. Because maybe the overall figures we're comfortable with, I guess, or we may say, well, that's it's a particular patient, but I'm concerned about the sort of long-term effect on that staff group if they're seeing that as almost becoming part of their working day.
I mean, if I respond with what I see as the sort of high-level assurance, and I'm sure Kenny will perhaps provide a bit more detail, but in terms of the high level of assurance, I think we obviously as an organisation know where the hotspots are. The incident reporting tells us that. I think if you look at the sort of restrictive practice paper, or the paper that comes to the committee, there is clear evidence that we're monitoring very closely not only the number of incidents, but the number of restraints, the number of seclusion, the number of rapid tranquillisation incidents, whether they're going up, whether they're going down, but not only in terms of restraint, the type of restraint, the type of incidents that's produced the restraint, and the type of, as well as the context for that in terms of things like the Safe Walls Initiative and the restrictive practice strategy, reducing restrictive practice strategies, as well as the level of training. And also in terms of the training, my understanding has always been that the people who provide the training, who write the reports that we read at the Quality Committee, are actually quite active in going into areas and reviewing situations and reviewing particularly challenging situations. So if I give an example, not from this month, but historically, they've gone into the Darwin Centre where they've had particular situations with a young person who's having to be nasogastric fed, and they're requiring some kind of holding to support that process, which can be extremely distressing for the individual, but can be extremely distressing for staff as well, and they've gone in to provide that support. So that would be my sort of high-level assurance as chair of the committee. I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, thanks. And Jenny, I completely agree. You know, we want to be in an environment where staff do not get assaulted, and we want to be in an environment where we do not have to use restrictive practices. And I think that's got to be our standpoint. And culturally, we need to be there. Now, we you know, I think that's a long-term ambition, isn't it? We've got some way to go. But where we are at the moment is we do treat every individual incident where this happens as exceptional. Culturally, we have to be in that place where we treat it that way, and we have to respond to it, because you're right. You know, there are areas that have been, you know, in the national headlines, and historically, I think mental health has been, you know, kind of normalised this, and that's had impacts, horrible impacts on service users and staff alike, and we do have to treat it as exceptional. And we've got the measures, as you know, around debrief, access to psychological support and wellbeing support, and I think we need to continue to push that. And we've also got, as Patrick mentioned, a strategy for reducing restrictive practice, and we're also doing some additional assurance on how we can reduce the likelihood of staff being assaulted, and again, we're in the middle of doing that review, and that's something I want to see us do and reflect upon annually as well, so that we're really driving as much as we can.
Thank you.
Okay. Before we leave your report, Patrick, we've got a policy to approve. Is that the medication policy?
Yeah.
I'm assuming that will go through without objection. Yeah. Good. Thank you.
It's actually the, bear with me, it's the high dose antipsychotic therapy policy, and it's approval for 3 years.
Thank you. Even that, yeah, thank you. Let's move on, because we're a bit behind schedule. Eric, IQPR.
Thank you, Chair. I won't go through the report because I think it's been through all the committees in a great deal of detail. But two things I will pick out are that IAPS has been renamed to Talking Therapies, and people may have noticed that within the report. And IAPS, we will see that disappear from future reports. And the other thing I want to raise was just the data warehouse and the data quality maturity index, which did drop as we implemented it in around the March time to less than 20%. But we're now back up to 80% plus for the numbers for previous months of the year, so that will continually rise until we get back to where we were, which was around about 95% from recollection, where we score extremely highly compared to any benchmark around. So performance overall does remain really positive. The usual hotspots still in place, but we are working to resolve those. But let's take any questions.
Anything from anybody? Can I just ask a system-related question? Because the last month or so has been very tough in negotiations at system level with the powers that be. Are those negotiations, discussions, have they reached a conclusion, or are they ongoing?
In terms of performance, or in terms of...
Well, in terms of agreed budget.
Yeah, so the system's position is all agreed as a balanced budget. It is going to be incredibly challenging. There are certainly risks, and we talked about them at length yesterday, predominantly around UH&N and continuing pressures based on winter, really, and opening additional capacity for far longer than what they anticipated. So there is an issue around that. However, they are currently underspent on virtual wards at this moment in time, so we're hoping there will be some trade-off. But I think we've always known that, particularly around urgent care and winter, those plans were incredibly tight, so that will no doubt come to fruition at some point in time, together with high expenditure on CHC within the IC.
Okay. Thanks. Because there's a lot of national buzz about systems in particular being...
yeah, I think we found the comments from Julian Hartley a little bit surprising. He seems to have more confidence than everybody else at this moment in time, based on his comments the other day.
Got a bigger budget than I have. Okay. I think we could probably move on. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Eric. Kenny, back to you for Service User and Carer Council notes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I'll be brief. The report you can take as I'll take the people who have read it. A couple of things to pull out of the report, which are really positive, and we're starting to see the fruit of some of the endeavours that we've put in, particularly around the growth of our peer support workers. You can see there areas that are developing posts and employing people with lived experience in them. We've now implemented and are confident around our peer support network, so that's up and running and being accessed by people who are in peer support roles in the same way that we would do for all of our other internal professional networks, which is fantastic to see. Co-production being embedded, really, so one thing I just wanted to pull out is about improving our policy position. So we are streamlining our policy, which will cycle through our governance in the short period of time, to ensure that people who wish to volunteer, to work on projects, to do a number of different things across the organisation, rather than being in paid employment, are able to do that in a more streamlined way, access financial support for doing so, and generally be supported so that they don't feel the burden of that volunteering process to offer their lived experience, which is a really important function that we can help them with. So they're the things that I wanted to pull out of the report. Again, I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay. Anything from anybody on Service User? Yes.
Really, just a parallel question. The Youth Council, when do we actually see a report on the activities of the Youth Council? Because, you know, I probably should know, but it seems quite a long time since we...
So we don't report it separately, Tony. We if there are things that come through the Youth Council, in the same way as our Learn Disability group, if there are specific things that come through here that we think the board would be interested in, we include them, but we haven't got anything this month. But again, happy to pick things up as they arise. Obviously, these forums exist and continue to do the work, but we don't necessarily show them here.
I suppose the question is, should we? You know, should we have a section within this report every month in terms of what the Youth Council does, because if it's not part of the, let's say, the layout of the report, it often gets overlooked.
I'm happy to include it. I mean, the only issue I would say is we've got a number of different areas that all have, you know, what do they call them, councils, but lived experience forums. It might become quite a long report, but I'm happy to include, you know, at the next board meeting perhaps.
Or maybe a monthly cycle that covers them all over 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, absolutely. I can take that away.
Yeah, but I'm just conscious of the fact that, you know, CAMS is a significant area that we do report on. You know, the youth aspect of that, the youth council is, I would say, fundamental to the development of that. So just an observation.
Sure, absolutely. Can try and include all the areas.
Okay, I think we're done on that. Thank you. Paul, over to you now on the...
Yeah, thank you, David. So, people plan. This is being developed with our people across the organisation. We had well over 200 people involved in focus groups and various events, as well as individual feedback. We've had 2 specific sessions, as Janet said earlier, for PCDC. We've had 2 sessions with JNCC. It's been to Leadership Academy, and the final version's been through both SLT and PCDC. The SLT version is the version that we've got. We've slightly tweaked it for the one that went to PCDC. It's really cosmetic. The content's not changed, but we've changed some of the photos, some of the colouring around some of the stuff. So it's not. This is a slightly different version than you'll see on the website as the final version, but the content is not changed. It is very much the we've altered some of the photos, added a few bits in terms of photographs and graphics. We've obviously built it on that feedback. We've built it on some evidence of what we know works, and it's here for us to hopefully agree. We've got a comms plan around making sure that we launch this, and we've got a whole plan. And what we've tried to do is to be ambitious. Russell's and we've had heroic was Russell's in some areas, but we felt that it was important to have some real ambition over the next 5 years as to how we're going to deliver better experience for our people, improve those fill rates, as you know, Kenny talked about in terms of obviously our clinical teams, but broader than that, over the next 5 years, and how we're going to really start to benchmark, not just within the NHS, but look externally at how well we're doing as an employer, and that satisfaction of the people that work for us and with us, to get that into a good place, of which, again, has been mentioned a couple of times, things like yesterday's Long Service Awards are part of that process of recognition, as many other things that we're doing. So, yeah, we've tried to keep it high level in the beginning, but clearly there's some detail in there that we will then track through PCDC to ensure delivery. We wanted to commit to some trajectories so that we can see where we're going and how well we're doing. So lots of people are involved. Thank you to everybody that has, and hopefully the board will see fit to approve.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions, comments? Yes.
Paul, just and he was picking up on Janet's point earlier about the last one. Actually, people I've engaged with this time around, having trajectories and things that they can point at or aspire to, in terms of numbers, I think is really helpful. And we know some of them are a challenge, and I suppose our employers remember that in 5 years' time, when to reflect that we were being heroic, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't push for it.
Yeah. And the other thing, sorry, I meant to say was it clearly links very closely with our strategy. It's built around and spills out very closely from the strategy, which I know if Liz were on holiday, she said in many forums about how delighted she is. I don't want to speak for Liz, but you know, she has said many times how delighted she is about how we've built it around the strategy.
Right. Good. Just as it should be. Anything else, anybody? Or are we happy to approve it? Yes. Yes.
Brilliant.
Well
Thank
done.
you.
Thank you very much. Janet, over to you for PCDC.
Thanks very
Sounds
much.
like
And I'm very
electricity.
conscious we're right up against the buffers on time, so I'll largely take it as read, other than to just note, although not approved by everybody, the Agenda for Change pay deal is being implemented. Not to underestimate the amount of effort in doing that, because as with the previous pay deal, it's rather perverse in its design, and it means all sorts of unintended consequences, and you'll note that support is being given to those who might find themselves with a lump sum falling out of receipt of other state benefits, etc. So all that has to be accommodated. I won't comment on the industrial action because it's already been covered. In terms of advise, as you know, we've discussed our effectiveness plan at the committee, and that was helpful to have that open discussion and feedback. The people plan that we've just gone through, it's taken a lot of our time and attention, as it has everybody else's, but absolutely worthwhile. I think it's worth noting the number of referrals to the Welfare Hub continues to be high, and we ought not to ignore that. It's a litmus test of how our people are feeling, but it's also great that we've got that facility there to accommodate and support people and redirect them to other services as required. And we must keep our focus on that. We don't want to lose that facility. We also had an interesting paper on NHS pension reforms. I know that sounds a bit sad, but actually they are quite important. I'm still not sure we understand all we need to understand, but it's on our personal development plans, isn't it, Paul?
It certainly is.
We're going to understand it all. We were going to do some work around civility and just restorative culture this afternoon, which I think may have to be deferred, but actually that's a really interesting piece of work that we're now launching on, and will start to underpin and support our already good culture here, but give people tools to help them to make that easier and embed it in the way that we do everything. The Assure points are very much as previous months, but very happy to take any questions on those. And just to note, there are some policy approval items right at the end. So resolution of grievance and dispute policy, a recognition agreement, and new starters relocation policy. I would just like to celebrate the fact that we now have no outstanding complaints. Hurrah. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Anybody? For Janet?
Just the policy approval.
So the policy approvals.
Thank you.
Resolution of grievance and dispute, recognition agreement. What's that mean?
The fact that we recognise the trade unions in
Oh,
negotiations.
thank you.
Yeah.
Bit
Don't-
louder.
don't
Yeah.
turn that one down.
No.
Right, thank you. I'm obliged. And new starters relocation policy. Yes, I can imagine what that is. Are we happy with those? Yes.
Thank you.
Good, that's a relief. Thank you. And thank you, Janet. Finance, Eric, last but not least almost.
Thank you, Chair. Performance in month one is really good. We're absolutely on plan. A little bit of insight with the same for month two. Thanks, we've just reported the numbers this morning. It's really pleasing though, because we didn't quite expect to be there. We know this is going to be a challenging year, and we are greatly benefiting actually from the number of vacancies and the new development monies that we've received so far this year. So until the team go and recruit, we should still be in a reasonable position. We've actually achieved a better payment practice code as well this month, which has been a bit of a challenge for us, certainly over the last 6 months of last year. So hopefully we're in a good position to continue for the rest of the year. The only other thing I really wanted to mention is we've got the audit committee on Friday to formally approve the accounts. The audit has been concluded. They've done that in a really short period of time. Hopefully, as you would expect, it's a really clean audit report. I know that will come through in future months, but I'm extremely pleased with the team. Really proud of them, because it has been done in a really short period of time. We're working with our auditors for the second year in a row. They've been on site. They started before we actually even submitted the accounts, but in doing so, it enabled them to do a bit of testing and get on with it. So it's been a really, really good relationship. So I'm just extremely pleased, and I'm positive and confident that we will go through the audit committee on Friday in a smooth manner. Thank you, Chair.
Good to hear.
On that happy note. No. Well, that's great. Any questions, anybody? No? In these troubled times, it's a pleasant surprise to get through the finance section without bumping along. Okay, so over to you, Russell, for the assurance.
Thanks, Chair. I'll pick out 4 areas and take the rest as read. We received the suite of IQPR metrics. Main focus around those was on the 4-week waits in Specialist, North Stats and Stoke Community, each of which have performance improvement plans but are not currently on trajectory, and we noted that this will be picked up through performance meetings. We also noted the position with regard to our data quality score, which Eric's just referred to, which is rapidly improving now after a small delay due to moving over to the new data warehouse. So we were assured that that's making progress. Received an update on estates, and we're assured that projects are broadly on track. And we also received an update on the point that we discussed in private board last time we met, which is the water temperatures across the Harpland site, and noted that that's making progress, as good progress as is possible in a tricky set of circumstances. In terms of finances, we were only looking at month 1, again, as Eric has just alluded to, so no great trends at this point. Things are on track broadly where they should be, and so we were assured of good progress there. And the final point I want to pick out is business opportunities. There were 3 parts to this. We received an update on the vertical integration of the Keele GP practice integration, and we were assured that that's progressing well. We'd previously received information about a consortium bid that we are part of for the new inclusive employability hub in Stoke-on-Trent. We were told that there are now 21 bids for that project, so we're entering a very competitive environment with the consortium that we're with, but we've managed to get through to round 2, so that's making progress. And finally, we were alerted to the fact that Stoke-on-Trent City Council have started soft market testing with potential providers on the re-tendering of the council's substance misuse service, and that's clearly something that we're keen to continue to be part of, and it looks like the tender for that will come out sometime in the autumn, so we'll receive further updates about that as we go. So that's all I was going to cover, Chair, and I'm happy to take questions.
Okay. Any questions for Russell? Well done. Thank you very much indeed. It says consent item, but it's actually the Audit Committee Assurance Report, isn't it?
It is indeed, and I can be very brief actually, and just to amplify what Eric's actually said, we have our extraordinary committee tomorrow on the 9th of June, and hopefully that stage the auditors will be able to furnish us with their report with the final amount of work they needed to do to tie things up, and we'll get a clean bill of health again for the umpteenth year. At that committee in May, we also reviewed the audit, the AGS, the draft annual report, and the Chief Internal Auditor's assurance, which was positive in terms of the controls which operate throughout this trust, with minor improvement, which is also great because it's essentially a assessment by an external reviewer on the governance that pertains to our financial systems throughout the trust. So that was good. We also looked at the draft annual report of the AGS and made a number of suggestions about those documents. But I think that the main thing to come across is to echo Eric's statement earlier on, that it's fantastic that we've got the accounts to bed so promptly. This would be unimaginable 5 or 10 years ago. And the finance team have done a brilliant job, and Eric as well, in terms of turning these out, because they are incredibly important accounts. They can seem boring in a trust like ours where there are never any problems with them, but boy, when they go wrong, they will be pointing at the chair and the chief exec and everyone else about why didn't you spot this? So it's great that we've got to this point. The finance team have done a super job.
Okay. Well, that's all good to hear, and presumably will continue to be good tomorrow. But you'll let us know if it is.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much on that happy assumption. Have we got anything else that we ought to be talking about? Oh, questions, yes.
No, it was at any AOB.
Well, yes, really, about this afternoon, I guess.
Well, yes, I was good. A couple of things.
All right.
One was about board development. Some colleagues will notice that board development's been cancelled. Sue, who was delivering board development, her daughter had to go into A&E last night at around 10 o'clock. She took her. We were actually out for a meal, Sue, Kerry, myself, and Gaynor, and a call, had to go drop everything, we had to go and take her to A&E. And she was still there this morning at past 9 o'clock, waiting to have an X-ray. She subsequently had an X-ray, but obviously she's been up all night with her daughter, so was unable to be here to present today. So we thought it might collectively, we had the discussion this morning, thought it might collectively be better for people not to, not to invent something, but to have the time back, which I think most of us would be welcome.
So we'll use that to bring the
we brought forward a remuneration committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the REMCO meeting will start at 1:05. Okay.
And then the other thing was just to remind colleagues that it's Pride Month this month, and we are doing a number of things, and we're promoting a lot of things through our comms team. We'll also be at Stoke Pride. I think it's on the 24th, I think. So we'll be
24.
Yeah, we'll be there. And also just to a colleague in the room who's not in the room, but if she puts a camera on, just to plug and she's going to kill me for this, but if you're interested in trans issues and understanding more from a trans perspective, then yeah, I'm getting the looks. No, can't see. Then Jen has this wonderful podcast that she does with another friend, Gillian, called Transvox, which is incredibly good. It's a superb, honestly, and I've learned so much about Jen, but so much about trans issues through listening to it. I think you're on episode 10. Is that right, Jen?
We did 11 yesterday.
You did 11 yesterday, yeah. So so I've listened to 10. You're on 11, yeah, 11 to come out. So it's called Transvox. If you're interested in trans issues, understanding it is brilliant. Honestly, it's really, really good. I'm not just saying that because it's Jen, but it is really good. In Pride Month, it's.
I didn't do this thinking of how much I'm personally sharing in that podcast for my colleagues, so you'll know far more about me than you really need to know.
No, you are visibly larger than life.
And that's saying something for me.
All right, I think we can happily draw this to an end and stick with our 5-past appointment for REMCO. But thanks everybody, it's been good fun today. Thanks for the technology underpinning of this complex arrangement, which is far more complicated than I've ever imagined. It's like living in a forest of black sticks of some sort, but it's all right. Thank you everybody. See most of you in half an hour, and there's a bit of a refreshment for those who